Our gorgeous presenter this morning is Sue H. Singleton. All these letters: BA, MBA, author, medical intuitive, mental health professional, CST, EOLMTT. Someday you're going to have to tell me what all those mean, Sue.
Okay.
An internationally renowned medical intuitive and master healer teacher with 30 plus years of experience. Sue has performed more than 9,000 readings and tens of thousands of healing sessions. Clients seek her highly detailed, accurate health insights and combination of 40 plus modalities for healing and transformation. Sue Singleton is the author of the highly acclaimed book, 9 Simple Laws to Create Joy and Grace, a comprehensive guide to manifestation, and co-founder of the Way to Balance Center, where she and Aaron co-create many healing tools, healing modalities, and workshops. Sue translates complex spiritual and health insights and concepts into simple terms with humor. Help me welcome Sue.
Thank you, Sheila. Thanks so much. So welcome to a medical intuitive approach to COVID-19 ongoing damage, or another possible subtitle would be COVID-19, the ticking time bomb. There's a lot we're going to be covering, and I'm going to actually start with a slideshow that I'll be sharing with you here. I'll be opening that up. And here we are with the slideshow. There we go. And so basically, there's a lot to cover. It's going to be a jam-packed hour, and there's a resource document that's going to be covering my recommendations for immune system, and if people are choosing to get the vaccines, what the vaccine protocol is too. So that's going to be a downloadable document, as Sheila mentioned. And at the end of the presentation, I haven't done this before, but I will be following the link over to the lounge, and I can stay there for about 15 or 20 minutes. I will be trying to address questions quite a bit during this initial part. And Sheila will be monitoring those for me. So you'll keep yourselves muted, and she will be sorting through and prioritizing when I have good moments for taking a few questions. But it's going to be a pretty busy slideshow and presentation today, and I wanted to just show you this is what COVID-19 looks like in a computer model. So highly magnified here, and gives you a sense of what those protein spikes are all about that people have been talking about. And I'm actually going to be sharing a lot of data, scientific data, as well as medical intuitive information about COVID. So this is actual COVID-19 coronavirus. That's what's in yellow. It's emerging from the cells, and those are showing up in blue and pink. They were cultured in the lab from a positive test. And so they used an electron microscope. This is from the National Institute of Health, one of their subchapters. So I thought it'd be interesting for people to see a few ways that COVID is working. This is what COVID does in the brain, and there's a whole cycle in the brain where it hypercoagulates some of the cells. It damages the red blood cells, it damages the platelets, and starts a whole cascading effect. And this is from the Journal of American Medicine. Some of these I'll be going through fairly quickly because it's not as though you have to understand every single piece of information in here. This is a pretty technical description on here, but the essence of it is what I just said. And I'd say that I have a pretty unique perspective because Aaron and I have such a large client base, and we're involved in all aspects of their lives, which means that not only do they tell us kind of what's been happening, but they tell us about all their family members and friends. So in that sense, I think that Aaron and I have had firsthand look at COVID-19 from many different perspectives, on probably more than the average medical doctor has had in the last year and a half, because like I said, most people don't share everything with their doctor, and they certainly don't talk about their family and friends with their doctor. So first thing, I've got some real patients here. This x-ray of the lungs on the left is normal. The one on the right is a 29-year-old male, and he has the crushed glass appearance of COVID-19 pneumonia. I've got a couple of other pictures coming up too, CAT scans, which are a little bit clearer. And so that's one of the ways it manifests, but we're only right this second talking about the respiratory system, the lungs. It affects a lot more in the body. And certainly where we are right now is not the end of the story. There's so much more behind the whole COVID-19 situation, let's call it. So this is a slice of a CAT scan in a 30-year-old male. And I did mean to mention on the crushed glass one, that man's, when he came into the emergency room, his only complaint was, I'm feeling like more tired than usual, and I feel a little bit of tension in my chest. That's all he said. And he went immediately into ICU. He did survive. This one, 30-year-old male, so 1 year older. And both of these cases were perfectly healthy, athletic people, no prior medical problems. So this 30-year-old male, he was having a little bit of respiratory distress. When they took his oxygen with an oximeter measuring device, it was in the low 80s. They were surprised he wasn't gasping. Now he has the version of COVID pneumonia that looks more like fluffy cotton balls. You can see that there. And because this is a slice of a CAT scan, it's much clearer and sharper to see. So it's a CAT scan, as you may know, is basically a series of hundreds of x-rays, and then they're all put together, but this is one slice from that. This one is a 25-year-old female, 1 week after she gave birth to a baby. The baby was born in the hospital, so she likely contracted COVID-19 in the hospital. So she had been experiencing tightness in her chest for the 3 days leading up her coming back to the hospital, didn't have a fever. In fact, many people have not been getting a fever with COVID-19. So she's got, again, the ground glass patchy opacities in her lungs. Her COVID test was pending when this was provided to me, but because of that classic look to it, which I'll just move, that's what I'm talking about. That is so classic of the crushed glass type that most certainly highly, highly reasonable that she did test positive. So we've had many, many things happening among our clients and also their family members and friends. So I wanted to review some of them because a lot of people don't realize. So first of all, the COVID-19 tests that exist are pretty inaccurate because there are so many entry points and so many places it's holding out that a simple sinus swab or nasal swab is not going to find it. And so very common, as most of you already heard, the loss of taste and smell, knife-like sharp pains throughout the body. Nerve pain can be sharp or burning. Shortness of breath, severe headaches, pressure in the frontal sinuses here at the forehead, or the cranial sinuses at the top of the head near the crown. A dry mucus patch in the throat with occasional cough, all the way up to a continuous cough. Many people, but not everyone, get a fever 99.4 or more that goes on about 4 to 6 hours, some people up to 24. But some people are having subnormal temperatures, so they're cold fevers. And body aches specific to the neck, the shoulders, upper back, hips, downward, and for others it's the whole body in pain. And actually, because of my controls here, I can't see the last thing on my slide. And I don't know if you can read that, Sheila, or if your controls are in the way too, so I can't read my bottom line there. But I'll continue with this other one. So muscle spasms and pain, joint and pain swelling. Now, when we're talking about pain, we're talking about extreme pain and neuromuscular pain, bone pain. Sometimes it feels like getting hit by a sledgehammer. Sometimes it feels like being stung by a bunch of bees. Sometimes it feels like you're being sliced with a knife. So that version is, it's going to wherever is your weak spot. So prior injuries that haven't been resolved, for example. And so it goes to the weakest point. The burning and sensation in the head, the joints or the nerves. People get chills, sweats, raw throat, dry throat, crawly skin, shooting head pains, as well as what we'd call headaches. A rash with an itch that looks like poison ivy, but it's not. Shooting rib pain, prickly heat throughout the whole body. Restless legs, thrashing, inner trembling, hallucinations, brain fog, total exhaustion, full body. The neurological balance issues. So in other words, losing your sense of balance, walking along, so lack of coordination, getting tremors and shakes, stiffness in the muscle groups or in the whole body, brainstem pain, numb extremities, blurry vision and vision decline, a lot of vision loss. So it can enter through the eyeballs. We've seen it enter through the ears, the eyes, the mouth, as well as the nose and the sinuses. We've found it in people's urogenital tracts. We've found it in the GI tract, the gastrointestinal tract. The extremities going numb, digestive issues, bronchitis, pneumonia, heart attacks and strokes have been happening as a result of this. So if it's not a heart attack, people are having racing heart, irregular heartbeats. The types of strokes that most people are having are the embolic, which means blood clots, because one of the ways that COVID-19 works is by hypercoagulating the blood. Symptoms very similar to encephalitis. So COVID-19 attacks the muscles, the nerves, the joints, the organs, the brain, the glands, and it awakens and aggravates dormant pathogens such as herpes, Epstein-Barr, hepatitis, Lyme disease, and Lyme's co-infections. It may worsen MS, Guillain-Barré syndrome, or other neurological conditions. So we've had some people go on for quite some time, and it usually depends on how soon they jump into getting care. Some people ignore it for a little while, but most people have been experiencing something of a discomfort level for about 5 to 7 weeks is the average, or 5 to 8 weeks. It varies a lot. So I'm going to give a couple of real life examples here. So a client and his wife both contracted the virus in mid-December 2019, so before we knew about COVID, and they had flu-like symptoms for 3 weeks, but it was atypical of any kind of flu they'd ever had. The husband fell ill 5 more times in the next 7 months and tested positive for COVID each time, but he had a whole different set of symptoms. Once it was the aches and pains, another time the respiratory distress, another time heart inflammation, so myocarditis. So every single time. Now, interesting that he had no antibodies. So they did end up testing him for antibodies, and he's a cancer survivor, and he went through all the usual treatments for his cancer, the chemo and the radiation. So interesting enough, as many times he got it, he never developed any antibodies, which is really too bad. A longtime friend that never has been a client, never has chosen to be a client, contracted the virus, and it awakened an old herpes virus. She had been in remission with no herpes issues at all for 35 to 40 years, and this woke it up, and the herpes virus went to her brain, caused seizures, hallucinations, and instant dementia. She was hospitalized for more than 2 weeks, recovered at home with lots of medication, but she still has dementia, and she underwent an entire personality change. And another client contracted the virus, had the extreme fatigue and body aches and difficulty breathing for a few weeks, but very low energy and unable to take deep breaths. She was one of the ones that she was an existing client that she actually was busy with work and she canceled a couple of her appointments with us. So by the time we got the first chance to work on her, she'd already been sick for almost 2 months. So it had been harder to help her as quickly. Usually the quicker that we can work on someone, the quicker that it clears up. 2 of our clients developed aortic aneurysms shortly after getting COVID-19. And for one, it was the aorta right at the heart, and the other one, it was the abdominal aorta. And fortunately, they were both Aaron's clients. He was able to reverse both aneurysms without them bursting. The doctors are scratching their heads a little bit to try to figure out, those aneurysms were just there a week ago. Where did they go? Because they're accustomed to it either bursting and killing the person or doing surgery. This one is probably one of the most pronounced examples I can give too. This woman had been a client years ago, hadn't been a client for probably about 12 years or so. She collapsed at home last spring in 2020. They took her to the hospital and she had blood oxygen in the low 80s. She had 2 strokes, pneumonia, DVT blood clots throughout one leg, several pulmonary emboli, which those are blood clots in the lungs, liver and heart inflammation, extremely high blood pressure, and sudden onset diabetes. So she became a client again a few months after this because she was in intensive care unit at Mass General Hospital and then was in regular hospital room for a while. And so it wasn't until she got home that she actually contacted us. So again, she had a delay in getting work done, but she actually was just recently able to return to work part-time as a speech therapist. But her recovery was tough. Again, she was just going through the medical aspects for quite some time. Now, as you know, I enjoy doing little energy things too. And so we're going to do a little brief energy experiential here before we move on with some other things in the presentation today. So I'm going to take a moment here and I'm sending you the energy of something. And I'd like you to just notice where you may feel this in your body if you're energy sensitive. And what Sheila will do is look in the chat box if a few of you want to type in where you're feeling it. And I realize we won't have lots of you replying right now, but if a few of you at least want to say where you're noticing this and in particular, what might it feel like?
You might notice we're getting liver, crown, lungs, breathe clearer, brain, crown, throat opening, my diaphragm relaxed so I could breathe.
Good, good. So what I've been projecting is, see, pathogens, which COVID-19 being a viral pathogen, it can be dormant, it can be alive and active, and it can be in energy imprints that are almost left behind like finger imprints or fingerprints, and also can be clusters of broken up DNA. And so where you're feeling it is where you have some aspect of COVID, either dormant, active, or remnants, residues, fingerprints. So on some level, you've been exposed, if not actually ill. So not wanting to leave you hanging that, uh-oh, Sue just said something that I don't like because of this, I'm actually going to project something to you for most of the rest of the presentation. I'm going to try to angle it so it's not so shiny. And this is actually a free download on our biomorphicgeometry.com website. Although we call it the COVID-19 biomorphic geometry, it actually covers all different sorts of illnesses and pathogens and immune systems. So this actually helps clear COVID, but it also helps prevent getting ill with COVID. And I forgot to unplug my telephone. So I will just unplug that and I'll be right back.
Call from the lounge.
I'm happy to have the energy because that going over all the symptoms was pretty tough. I was really glad to get that positive energy.
Yes, so this, sorry for that little interruption there. So anyway, this is available, I think it's on the biomorphicgeometry.com website. It's on our thewaytobalance.com website too. It's easier to find it on there. And I believe it's in the What's New blog section. But if any of you have problems locating it, just contact Veronica. She'll be back in the office on Monday and she can send it to you or direct you to how to find it and save it. She's in the process of colorizing it. So the one that's currently on there is actually our hand sketched one, and it works just as well as the computer generated one, but I don't think she's quite finished the colorizing in the computer generated version of it. So it works on strengthening the immune system in the right way. And we're going to talk about different aspects of the immune system shortly here, as well as working on active COVID. And as I said earlier, preventing it. So I'm going to be projecting this to you for a while. So that's already working on those areas. So like I said, I hate to bring up like bad news and then not have a solution for you. So now these are some interesting facts, and these are all either from the National Institute of Health or Journal of American Medical Association. 34% of those who contract COVID-19 develop neurological problems. That's a lot. 78% of the people with diagnosed with COVID-19 showed evidence of heart damage caused by the disease within weeks after their recovery. And that, again, is in Journal of American Medicine Cardiology. Also in JAMA, 10% of those infected become COVID long haulers. And these include people that were previously healthy at any age. Many people are developing longer-term internal inflammation from the various COVID-19 vaccines. So kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. COVID-19 is dangerous and there are issues with the vaccines. If COVID-19 enters the body through the eyes or the throat rather than the sinuses, the nasal and sinus swabs will not detect it. In fact, interestingly enough, with the woman I told you about that ended up in the intensive care unit at Mass General, they did 9 COVID tests on her, all the sinus and nasal ones, and they all came back negative. So the doctors and nurses said there, you know, we know this is COVID. You've got every single way that someone could have COVID. Even the x-ray of the lungs with the type of pneumonia that she had. It's all classic, and yet we can't get a positive test. So she never actually got labeled with it, but intuitively I tuned in that it was, and she knew it was, and they did at the hospital. So that was very interesting. 33% of the adolescents who contract COVID-19 end up in the ICU at hospitals with very serious complications. 33%. We're talking teenagers. And they're presumably healthy. 39% of all people who contract COVID develop type 1 or type 2 diabetes within 6 months. These are all really things to pay attention to. So my advice is protect yourself and don't catch it. So that's why we're going to get into some strategies too. So I know that a lot of places have lifted the rules and everything, and I still say social distancing and masking remain important, not only with the many mutations, and they're only talking about 4 of the mutations. There's actually over 90 mutations of COVID-19 out there right now, but they're talking about the ones they're most worried about. And it's normal for any virus to mutate. That's what a virus does. And this whole question, I don't answer it for people. To vaccinate or not vaccinate is a really, really personal decision, and it's a really controversial one. So I don't feel it's my job to tell someone that they should or should not vaccinate. So what I prefer to do is to educate people and allow them to make their own choice. So for people that choose not to be vaccinated, then I have certain things that I recommend in terms of, besides social distancing and continuing to remain vigilant and spending as much time outdoors as possible. So one of the things is, and later on, it's not in the slideshow, but it's on the document, that any of you choosing to vaccinate, then there's a whole protocol to prepare you for it and to follow in the aftermath. And that's all, like I said, a free download afterwards. So some of these more important steps are in that handout, so you don't need to worry about scrambling to write notes on this either. So all this most important stuff is in that handout. So the innate immune system is the first line of defense. So if you're in a battle, it's the frontliners that are making up the innate immune system. So you don't want that front line to fail. And that's what happens, that it fails, is what starts the whole process of cellular invasion. So therefore, once it breaches the innate immune system, the adaptive immune system will kick in. And that's a good thing, because it can still save your life, because something else needs to happen when the first line of defense crashes. And this is also where those cytokine storms can occur, because the adaptive immune system kicks in and it's doing everything it can to fight it. And yet that's supposed to be secondary. It's supposed to be just the little bit that got past. So if someone has a totally wiped out innate immune system, they're already at a great disadvantage. The other thing in terms of prevention is avoid or reduce any immune weakening foods and beverages: alcohol, sugar, fruit juices, simple starches, processed foods, pasta, genetically modified foods. Also stay well hydrated. Exercise, and it doesn't mean it has to be intense exercise, just form of exercise, even if it's walking, treadmill, things of that nature. And then I'll get into some of the potential supplementation for this in a few minutes. Actually, probably the next slide. So a lot of people say, well, what's in Aaron and Sue's apothecary? Well, quite a few things. And some of them are in our daily protocol since COVID started, and some are as needed. So obviously we use our own Energy of Life tools because we have quite a few of them. So the card that I'm projecting at you is part of what we do. And to use it is as simple as you put it on the floor and you sit over it in a chair. And it's just that the chair should be either a wooden frame or plastic resin or wicker, something of that nature, rather than a metal frame, because you want that design energy to come up unchanged by any kind of an overlayment. So a totally metal chair won't work. You could stand over it too, but because you're generally going to be using it for about 15 minutes at a time. People that have our rings of Odin, there's many different things that work on the immune system and pathogens: lightning water, copper ion water, PathoClear pendant, firelight, pathogen clearing liniment. So we made a body serum that works on not just COVID-19, but everything. We have about 4 or 5 different pathogen clearing products, the 12 element PathoClear crystals and liquids. So there's quite a few different options in there. And the nice thing is they work on not just COVID-19, but on everything. So for the innate immune system, there's 2 really important things, and I'm going to explain why. MediHerb, or a very high quality echinacea premium. If the echinacea doesn't make your mouth tingle intensely for a moment, then it's not a high quality echinacea, and you might as well just not buy it or throw it away. So the one I know is absolutely top quality is MediHerb. It's pharmaceutical grade out of Australia, and it's something we carry at the Way to Balance. And what that does is it actually works on creating more thymus gland T cells, T regulatory cells, I should say. So thymus T regulatory cells are kind of like the managers of something, whatever it is. And in this case, they manage how many white blood cells of different types, neutrophils, macrophages, all of those, how they get created, and making sure there's enough of them, but having more of these room monitors, so to speak. So acting like Sheila's acting today. She's the room monitor. Well, the echinacea premium and the thymus T regulatory cells are kind of like the virtual room monitor, making sure there's enough room monitors happening. Now, there may be some other forms of calcium that would do this, but the standard process, full food-based supplementation company, which we also carry that, their calcium lactate is an ionizable form of calcium. So what I'm about to say about calcium is not going to work with anything other than an ionizable form of calcium. Now, could there possibly be ionizable other calciums out there? There could be, but the calcium lactate by standard process fits in that category. So what we recommend and what we do is the echinacea premium, 1 twice a day. If you're in a really heavy exposure, high risk situation, you can certainly take a lot more of that. That's great. In fact, one of the co-founders of MediHerb, when he travels by airplane, and he's been doing this for years, he'll take 10 or 12 of those a day. And he hasn't gotten sick in a very, very long time. So the ionizable form of calcium, the calcium lactate, you take 3 twice a day, and you take it at the same time as the echinacea premium. And this is where, again, it creates more appropriately the different subsets that would be in the blanket white blood cell category. And that way, having enough of all of these things, enough of these particular specialized cells makes for the innate immune system being strong. And when that is impenetrable, then even if you get exposed, you won't get sick. However, you could still pass it on to others because you'd be in a shedding phase, but at least it protects you. Also, we recommend vitamin D3, and we happen to like the Pure Encapsulations brand because it doesn't have a lot of additives, it's gluten-free. And so optimal levels in your blood for vitamin D is supposed to be about 75. So if your doctor doesn't offer this as a test, you really need to start asking for that every time you get blood work done so you know where you are. So the 5,000 IUs daily really depends if that's right for you, because if you're low, if you're down in the 30s or 40s in your blood level, then you would need to take temporarily a lot more than 5,000 IUs a day. And also, if you don't eat a lot of green vegetables or take some sort of a greens supplement, you'll want to get a vitamin D3 that has K1 in it, which is basically like green leafy vegetables. So Erin and I eat lots of that, plus we do a green supplement as well. So therefore, that dosage can vary. And there is such a thing as getting too much vitamin D, and that's why I recommend that people do get tested. MediHerb's Turmeric Forte, we take 1 twice a day. The loading dose for it is 2 twice a day for 2 weeks, and then the maintenance dose is that. This one crosses the blood-brain barrier. It works on reducing inflammation everywhere in the body. Most turmerics do provide support to the digestive tract, but that's it. So if you're really wanting to target inflammation in the GI tract, and you don't care as much, but for me, I want full body support. So this Turmeric Forte crosses the blood-brain barrier and stays bioavailable 12 hours. So that's why you take it twice a day, so that you've got 24-hour dosage or coverage by taking it twice a day. We also take, we alternate between a couple of immune supports. We take a standard process one called Epimmune Complex, which has medicinal mushrooms. That one's a vegan product, but we also sometimes take Immuplex, which is another one of their very high quality immune support, and that one does have some animal glandular sub-extracts in it. Then we take a B complex, B core, And we also take Greens First Pro, which actually has greens, red fruits, purple fruits, enzymes, etc. And that's 3 twice a day. So we take, you know, a hefty handful of things on a regular basis. And we eat well. Those of you that are on our personal Facebook page, you're seeing our foodie pictures that we enjoy cooking and sharing what we make, colorful foods and lots of vegetables and variety on our plate. So there are some things we throw in as needed, such as standard process cataplex C or another really good quality vitamin C. And when I say a good quality vitamin C, it should really have root and bioflavonoids. It should be the full spectrum. The cataplex C by standard process has every subset of C in it, which is about, I think, 80 to 85 subsets of vitamin C exist. Red marine algae is a good thing to have on hand because it's a natural antiviral that has been shown to work really well with COVID-19. And I'm not making healing claims here, so just covering my butt here. We make our own, or I should say, a colloidal silver that a friend of ours makes, but then we do our energy of life enhancements to it, which amplifies it. We sometimes take that. We don't take that all the time. We sometimes will take Gaia black elderberry syrup. We also have a near infrared heat lamp at home that we use as needed, and then our own energy of life light box with a 7 rays glass that we use as needed, and then other colors too, but one of them is a 7 rays glass with extra programming in it. So those are some of the things that we have in our apothecary. And I would say that it can happen so quickly, especially with some of these variants in terms of how people are getting it. And I'm going to find it rather interesting to just look at, like, say, late June, because of so many people celebrating a lot on Memorial Day, and a lot of the people that were planning on having outdoor parties move them indoors in the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic states because of all of the rain and the cold. So it will be very interesting to see what happens with a lot of the unmasking, and time will tell. And because these other variants are continuing to surface, I don't think this is the end of it. Do I think that next year is going to look a lot better? Yes. We were surprised that one of our bigger events here in New England, in Massachusetts, as a matter of fact, is taking place in person in November. And given that that's been a 14,000 attendee event in the past, we were rather surprised they're holding it in person this year. They didn't hold it at all last year. However, they're reducing headcount. They're reducing the number of booth spaces. They're disinfecting the speakers' rooms in between each talk, you know, so that there are some things. And so that's just going to be an interesting observation over the coming months. This is basically what happens. So COVID-19 has to invade the cells in order to replicate. So you really do have multiple opportunities to intercept it. So the first thing it does is it lands on the outside of our cells. It might be in our throats, our eyes, our nose, our skin, our heart, our lungs, or our gastrointestinal tract. So it's on the outside of the cells in these areas. And then it attaches to the outside of those cells. So if you can douse, tune in, and catch it when the first thing has happened, which is what I would just call exposure, is what I would call it, the landing pad, so to speak, and catch it before it attaches or immediately detach it. That's a very important thing, because once it attaches, a certain amount of time passes and it invades the cells. So it literally pierces the cell membrane, which those spike proteins help it do that. And that's why a lot of people are feeling this intense prickly pain with it. And if the innate immune system is nice and strong, then it won't be able to maintain attachment. It actually creates an inability for it to attach or to pierce, because that cell membrane will be stronger in a healthy person with a healthy innate immune system. So once it gets inside, it uses all of our cells' genetic material to go ahead and replicate itself. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So as earlier, prevention is the best. And then the next best is to nip it in the bud at each of these. And, you know, I'm really not going to get into conspiracy theories or anything. I don't think that's worthwhile, but I can tell you that COVID-19 is a real thing. I've had 2 family members die from COVID-19. One's my spiritual sister's dad, so he's like family to me, and then my aunt. And among our client base, we haven't had a single client die. In fact, the only client that got hospitalized was the one that actually wasn't a client and became a client again. So not under our care did she end up hospitalized. But among our client bases, almost every single one of our clients has family members and friends that did die. So it is a real thing. And I get asked this all the time, so I will say this much, that it is obviously genetically engineered. There is no way that in nature that this mutant of SARS and Corona and HIV could possibly create it in this short a time period from all these other things. So it was definitely an engineered thing, but I'm not going to even begin to discuss any theories about who did it, how it got out, or anything. I just want to say that it is man-made, and that therefore that's of concern that this happened. And obviously whoever created it, I don't think intended it, did not understand the full consequences. And getting it and recovering from it is really not the end of the story for the most part.
Sue, time check.
Yes. Say that again, please, Sheila.
Just a time check.
Yes, so we've got about 15 minutes left.
Mhm.
Okay, so are there some important questions in there? Because I was going to lay out important dowsing questions. So that's what this page is about. And I believe that's the last page in the slides anyway. But do you have some good questions there in the chat box that I can answer?
Well, I think that you can answer this one in chat after that. Cindy wanted to know what could be a good mini apothecary, but I think your slide is more important right now.
Okay. Yep. And actually, I would say, yeah, I'll do that in the lounge afterwards, unless we have time here. That there's certainly, yes, we could go back to a mini version of that, but there's a certain number of things. So as you're dowsing and pendling, it's important to ask some questions that, first of all, have I been exposed to COVID-19? And then to ask when or where, because that's been really helpful. As Erin and I start on when we're working with our private clients, we tune in and find out, have they had new exposure? And we tune into when it was it about roughly 5 days ago, roughly 10 days ago, whatever. And then they trace back where they were. And then almost every single time we do this, they say, oh my God, yeah, I remember exactly where I was. And that's where they start realizing they were either in an unsafe environment or they let their guard down. And one woman was taking her father to medical appointments, and she actually was told to wait in the car, and she did, but she had to help him get inside. So she went to the door, and then she was greeted at the door, and then she went back. Well, then he got exposed and he gave it to her. So they both got sick with it, and her elderly father actually recovered more easily than she did, which was rather interesting. So the other thing is what region of the body or what organs are affected, because that's going to dictate how you work on it. And then to kind of get a sense of the phase, is it simply landed? Is it attached? Or has it invaded? And so these are some questions you could even ask yourself today, because probably most of you were aware of something as I sent that energy out there. And it's important to know, is it dormant or is it active? Another really important question is, do I have lingering damage or inflammation from being ill with COVID-19? And if so, where? And sometimes you could have both, because you are susceptible. And some of you may know that if someone tested positive for COVID-19, the recommendation was to wait at least 90 days before getting vaccinated because of very strong reaction. Now, my oldest brother, who is in very poor health, actually got COVID-19, and much to my shock, he survived. I did not expect him to survive. He's not open to what we do, but obviously if he had ended up in the hospital with it, I probably would have just said, will you please give me permission? But I felt that I was not supposed to interfere, and he didn't want me to, but he actually recovered at home. They caught it really early, and then his doctor had him get vaccinated more than 90 days afterwards. But I was shocked, because here he has all these pre-existing conditions, and I had had a conversation with him about it's important to not get it because the chances of you surviving it are pretty slim. And yet he did, and he has a terrible lifestyle and a terrible diet and all these pre-existing conditions. And then a couple of the examples I gave to you earlier in the slideshow, where we're talking 29-year-old, 25-year-old, 30-year-old that had no pre-existing conditions, and they ended up miserably sick. And people that we know of through clients, we're talking about an EMT, a young EMT. He was roughly about 30 when he contracted it, obviously on the job, most likely. And he ended up in intensive care for an extended period of time. And he had to learn how to walk again. He had to learn how to breathe again. And then the same spiritual sister where her dad died, her half brother is 52. And he ended up, he didn't believe that COVID-19 was a real thing. He thought it was a false story. And he ended up in the ICU for a month. And then he was in regular hospital for quite a while after that. And he had to undergo a lot of intensive respiratory therapy and cardiac therapy, and learning how to walk again too. And he actually did not have any other pre-existing conditions. He was overweight, but he did not have any other pre-existing diagnoses or anything. So the next question about lingering damage or inflammation from the vaccine. And like I said, it's a whole spectrum whether people are or not being vaccinated. But if you have been vaccinated, what might you be holding inflammation? As probably most of you have heard, that a lot of people post-vaccination are developing cardiomyopathy. And that inflammation of the heart, for some people, is short-lived, and for some people is long. And this even includes teenagers, 20-somethings, 30-somethings. And so it's like a toss-up, because getting COVID-19 is dangerous, and then yet there are potential issues with the vaccine, and that's where people kind of need to weigh for themselves. So then in terms of needing specific tools or supplements, you can literally use the handout that Sheila put in the chat box and download it, and you can dowse which of the ones are right for me. And if you don't know how to dowse, then because you're at the Dowsers Convention, you probably have friends who know how to dowse or pendle for you. That certainly there can be a shorter list, but I would say some of the easier things are to making sure that you're eating really appropriately. Let's see. So then to be specific about which supplements or tools are right for you. And then another important thing is sometimes people need outside help. You might be able to do it all yourself, but do I need medical intervention, or do I need natural approaches? Who or what will benefit me the most? So I think in this situation we're all in, it's important to do those questions. I'll leave that slide up for a moment here. We're supposed to be wrapping up fairly soon. And do we have any questions in the chat box, do you think, Sheila, that I should be addressing?
The apothecary one was the most,
asked about.
uh,
All right. And that,
okay, one other thing. Bob has COVID long haul symptoms since October, still getting nausea, fatigue, etc. He may want to have a private conversation.
yeah, if that would be probably becoming a private client, because it would be important if to find out what were the weak spots that caused you to still not be recovering, and then what would be the right customized plan for you. So that probably isn't just a discussion. I think it's probably more of a full assessment as a client, but because it is a very complicated situation when people have the long hauler aspect of it.
If I can just interject my own, any virus can be what I call a stealth virus. I've had 2 cases of having an allergic reaction to a flu and then having chronic symptoms for years afterwards. And that's what shingles does. It lingers in hidden places in the body and then jumps up.
Yes, it does. And there's many stealth pathogens, including COVID-19 and herpes and Lyme disease and Bartonella and Ehrlichia. There's many stealth pathogens, not just viruses. And so they're something to be reckoned with and addressed and taken pretty seriously.
And Cindy asked, which one of your products is your top choice to have on hand?
I would say that Erin's and my personal favorite for almost everyone is the Firelight Body Serum, because even if people tend to be sensitive to a lot of things, they can apply it on their belly or on the soles of their feet. So the only people that wouldn't work for so much is someone that has sensitivity to smell, because there's a lot of strong essential oils in there. So if someone has that, then either the 12 element crystals, which work on all pathogens, and those are crystals to meditate and self-heal with, or the PathoClear pendant, a necklace that you wear for limited amounts of time. So I'd say those are my top 3. There's so many more possibilities, and if anyone has a set of Rings of Odin, there's quite a few things in there. And then I would recommend everyone, download this free COVID-19 one. And Veronica won't be back in the office until Monday, but if you have problems finding it, so I can repeat that again, it's Biomorphic Geometry, B-I-O-M like Mary, O-R-P-H-I-C, and then the word geometry.com. And it's in the what's new or blog update section. And you scroll down a little bit and you'll see it, and it'll say open and view or download to your computer, and then you print it out yourself. And we laminated ours just to make it easy that, you put it down on the floor, after a while, it gets kind of beat up. So we laminated it, just makes it easier.
Well, all the handouts are uploaded in chat,
Great.
including the evaluation link.
Okay.
If anyone hasn't done this before, you go to the evaluation link on the website. You have to put in the name of the speaker and the name of the program item. Don't be too nice. Be nice, but don't be too nice, because we all need to learn how can we make this better if we don't get honest answers. The other thing is, if you think that you need something, we're dowsers, we could dowse through which thing should I get first. Donna Lee has a question about nebulizing hydrogen peroxide, which made me go, eh.
Yeah, I would not recommend nebulizing hydrogen peroxide. Absolutely not. I would recommend nebulizing glutathione, however. Never nebulize hydrogen peroxide, even diluted. It's such a delicate balance, and there's more risks with peroxide. And glutathione is fantastic. So getting the liquid form of it can be a little harder. You usually have to go through a natural practitioner to do it. Oral glutathione is also very helpful, but I would definitely not recommend hydrogen peroxide nebulized.
I think people should be very careful what recommendations they give.
Yeah,
That's
really be very cautious about anything you see on the internet, especially on social media, because there's so much misinformation out there. Oh, someone wants me to spell glutathione. So it's G-L-U-T like Thomas, A, T like Thomas, H, I-O-N like Nancy, E like Edward.
yeah, I had that right. I used to be a medical transcriptionist.
Yes.
Okay, Jeanette, Jeanette cannot download. Give me your email in a private chat and I will email them to you. Oh, I should give you my email address.
Yeah, and the other option, like I said, is to contact Veronica, and I can give that email address after you do that. So, because Veronica is at info, short for the word information, at theway2balance.com. So THEWAYTO, B like boy, ALANCE.com. Do I have time to just answer? I think Roxanne asked, what are my thoughts on what may be happening as a result of some of the vaccines?
Absolutely.
I do expect that both the disease itself, COVID-19, and the vaccines are likely to be causing more autoimmune issues in the coming time. I'm also expecting to see more cardiovascular issues and more brain issues. So those are my bigger concerns. The other thing I don't think I actually said it out loud, but COVID-19 has a really strong ability to hang out in the gut. So the other thing that I didn't really get a lot into is gut health, because I only had so much time for this presentation. So taking good probiotics and things that support good probiotics are important, because it can hang out in your GI tract until there's an opportune moment. And I'm actually not seeing people who have been vaccinated shedding unless they actually actively have COVID. I have not seen them shedding vaccine residues. I've seen them shedding actual virus. And so many people that have been vaccinated have already had the virus in them. So I'm not finding that the vaccines are shedding, only true COVID-19 is shedding. That's what Erin and I have been observing in our work. So like Sheila said, I will just take a moment to step away